Morning, everyone. Good evening for you that is watching us from China. It's a pleasure to receive you all for this webinar today. This is the second webinar of a series on biological inputs in agriculture. This event is part of the annual Luiz de Queiroz Week, organized by the Luiz de Queiroz College of Agriculture, Esalq, of the University of São Paulo, in honor of the college founder. The webinars brings together faculty members of the A5 Agri-Food Alliance, comprised by 5 universities globally recognized for their scientific knowledge, research expertise, teaching, and training in agriculture. And they are China Agricultural University, Cornell University, University of California, Davis, Wageningen University and Research, and the University of São Paulo. The A5 Agri-Food Alliance is dedicated to the sustainable transformation of agriculture and food systems through its commitment to developing advanced knowledge, education, and training for future leaders in agri-food systems. First, I would like to present our participants, professors for today's webinar. Dr. Zing is a full professor at the Department of Animal Science at the University of California, Davis. He has been working with beef cattle nutrition for many years with more than 200 published articles. Good morning, Dr. Zing. Dr. Calves is a full professor also at the Esalq Laboratory of Animal Nutrition, College of Animal Science and Technology in China Agricultural University, and he has been working with dairy cattle nutrition and management for many years also. Good evening for you, Dr. Calves. And finally, Dr. Bruno, that is a little late, but he's right here. He is an assistant professor at the Department of Animal Science at Esalq, and Dr. Bruno is working with aquaculture and agriculture integration, aiming at sustainable food production systems. So I would like to thank you all for accepting our invitation to participate in this webinar. It's really a pleasure to have you here. So, together with the constant increase in demand for animal protein, we have seen also a concern about sustainability for food production. And as we have learned 2 days ago with Dr. José Eduardo Portela Santos in another virtual panel, the animal health industry represents a $47 billion business in the world, and about 60% of that is related to nutrients and additives. So it's a huge industry related to animal feeding and raising. We have also learned that there is a movement towards more natural bio inputs as a result of consumers' pressure, which in a way affects international trade of animal products. So we have some pressure coming from the consumers to change the way we feed the animals and how we treat and everything. And because of that, there is a pursuit for natural alternatives for synthetic antibiotics, which most of the time are considered as safer products. So it seems that active ingredients and plant extracts will be a key tool for meeting tomorrow's environmental challenges and consumers' expectations. And so Monizing is a molecule discovered for about 50 years ago, is for sure the most used additive for cattle feeding around the world. And on the other hand, several more natural additives have been developed for feeding animals of different species. So I'm going to start with Dr. Zing, asking him why Monizing is still the most used additive for beef cattle nowadays.
Since about 1971, the ionophores were introduced first as a coccidiostat in poultry and later in 1976 it was introduced also for beef cattle as a growth promoter or a promoter of increased feed efficiency, and as well as being a coccidiostat. This was kind of this introduction had some serendipity associated with it. They found that in vitro, the use of the ionophore reduced or modified the acetate propionate ratio and fermentation, resulting in less methane production. And so this has been and continues, surprisingly, that continues to be the one of the main purported benefits of the ionophore. And however, in reality, most of the research would suggest that it, in fact, does not reduce methane production. Instead, it has some other benefits which may have enabled the ionophore to continue to be so very, very popular. Certainly, virtually all cattle on feed are receiving, I say virtually, except for natural cattle, let's say, all cattle on feed are receiving in North America and Mexico an ionophore. And I think the perceived benefit to the ionophore has to do with more with the reduction of digestives, reduction of bloat, as well as some potential for increased feed efficiency. And this is what has made, Carla, the problem very, very difficult in terms of finding an alternative, because we know that there's a lot of pressure to eliminate the use of antibiotics in cattle feed. And so in the search for alternatives, the problem is that we still do not know exactly what the mode of action is of the ionophores for promoting animal performance. But the big difference between the ionophores and other potential feed additives is the amount of independent research that's been conducted in support of the ionophore. And this is, there's such a wealth of information. For example, if you look at selenomycin, the ionophore selenomycin, you look since 1980 to 1994, the 15 independent published studies with selenomycin show an average feed efficiency response of 7.7% with a standard deviation of 2.7. That means that a feeder can be have 95% confidence that the response to adding that product to the diet will be greater than 2.3% improvement in feed efficiency. That's twice the cost. In other words, the benefit is almost guaranteed. Now you take the essential oils and other potential bioadditives, and there is so very little research that's been conducted on these products in terms of independent studies that we cannot be sure, because we don't have a good estimate of the variation in response. We cannot be sure that these products will pay the risk of supplementation. And most nutritionists, as myself included, what we like to see is that the average response or the potential benefit is at least twice the risk cost of adding the ingredient to the diet.
Okay, and why didn't Lazalosid was so good as Monizing in terms of use in feedlots and so on?
I think that the benefit for Lazalosid, and it is quite, it still remains quite popular as a feed additive, but not so much for feedlot cattle, but more for range cattle. The reason is that Monizing actually has such a powerful inhibition on feed intake. Its acceptability is greatly affected by the concentration. So to put Monizing in a supplement on range can be very difficult in terms of animal consumption and so forth, where Lazalosid can be consumed at much higher levels without a response. But the response to Lazalosid is less.
It does not depress intake as Monizing does, right? Okay. And is there any other additives being used in the US for changing like rumen profile, fermentation profile, or something like this, or aiding with health issues?
I think that there's a number of other additives that are being used. We can't, when we talk about phytochemicals, we can't discount niacin, thiamine. These are vitamins that are still supplemented. Another area that has considerable popularity are the probiotics and the prebiotics. These are the cost of these additives are so low that the risk, if there isn't a response, is not so great. And so these products have shown some benefit, particularly in terms of intestinal health and long-fed cattle. So this is so we see a lot of use of the prebiotics and probiotics. Prebiotics are just hydrolyzed yeast cells, beta-glucans, mono-oligosaccharides, those type of glyconutrients. And I guess that as far as those kinds of additives, the essential oils are very expensive, and maybe in Europe where feed costs are extremely high, but like in your country, in Brazil, where feed costs are very low, and even in the United States where feed costs are comparatively low, the cost of the additive against the feed cost is very high. And so you have to have a very high level of confidence in an improved feed efficiency before you could even think about adding that stuff to the diet.
Okay. And do you think we have a promising active ingredient or plant extract for the future?
I think that, for example,
research just started.
A lot more work with the essential oils needs to be conducted. This is the issue. You know, what I like to see is at least 10 independent studies before I even consider a feed additive. And so obviously in the case of essential oils, we are a long ways away from that. It does look promising, but the cost is very high. But perhaps with greater acceptability or acceptance, let's say, maybe the price will come down to something reasonable. Yeah.
Do you think that the consumers know that monizing, that is considered antibiotic, has a lot to do with sustainability because it increases feed efficiency and reduces methane emission? So,
well, what you're saying is, I think, a very important issue, and we could debate this one, but we don't know exactly who is driving this change in terms of antibiotic usage, particularly with antibiotics such as the ionophore. We don't know what's driving it. I think most consumers wouldn't have a clue what that stuff is, and so I don't know if they're making the decision based on sustainability or whatever. I think that it's somewhere else. The decisions are being made somewhere else.
good.
I think sometimes, especially with respect to Europe, these become non-tariff trade barriers. And I think that we can't ignore the political aspect of these types of barriers. And this would include the Pacific Rim as well.
What do you think it would happen if monizing would be banned in US as it did in Europe?
Well, the important thing to remember is that the response to the ionophore monizing has certainly decreased. Now I'd say the average response in terms of feed efficiency would probably be around 2.5%, probably around 2.5% improvement in feed efficiency. It's a very small response. And most of the time, in a well-managed feedlot, you wouldn't see a difference. So I think right now the driving factor on this is controlling feed intake. And I think as feedlots do a better job of managing feed delivery and calling feed and so forth, I think that the benefit from these types of additives will be even less.
Good, very nice. It remembered me, Dr. Huber, my advisor, saying that management cannot be replaced by frou-frou powders, right? So that's very good. So let's move now to dairy cattle. And Dr. Cal, we have also several additives that may be used to improve performance in animal health. And as a dairy researcher, I know how much synthetic antibiotics are used in commercial dairies and the impact of that in bacterial resistance, among other problems. And China is known worldwide for its excellence in natural medicine for humans with the traditional medicine. And so people may wonder if there is something of that is being applied to dairy systems. Do you have any kind of additives related to that?
Okay, thank you, Carla. You can hear me very well?
Yes.
Okay, it's a good question, and we are to the dairy nutritionists in Brazil and China, and especially the calf and heifers. I think you know and we all know that the antibiotics, especially the abnormal milk with antibiotics, is fight to dairy calves and will produce long and bad effects to her productivity in future. It's not good news, but more and more the Bangtang milk and milk replacer fight to calves. And now is the new situation as in China and in the world. We all know that we are familiar with the extensive use of antibiotics in animals has created the problem of the antibiotic resistance. Also, this happened in China, but this year is the July the 1st. We cannot use any antibiotics in the feed. So I think it's good for the young animals. Some of the scientists are now thinking for alternative. Currently, some Chinese herbal are practical to treat the disease in animal, but most of them are used for improving the immunity or health of dairy cattle in the ones. So here I want to share a data we did 5 years ago. We led a research called Cow Longevity in China, collaborated with the Wageningen University and the research team. And the most frequent primary top 3 culling reasons are the reproduction problems and the digestive system disorders, or we call it metabolic disorders. And the third is the other related disorders, such as mastitis and the teeth injuries. So here, what I really want to share is one of the reasons for metabolic disorders is the forage. If we use the low quality forage, such as the corn stalk or rice straw, very low the quality. If we want to produce more milk, it means we will add more concentrate to the diet. But as the nutrients, we all know that the forage plays a very, very important role in the diet fed to the dairy cows, to supporting both the chemical and the physical demands to cows. So in a dairy farm, the feed manager must pay more attention to the quality and the value of the forage. It's also important to reduce the fluctuations in dietary composition, track the quality of the forage, and to timely evaluate the nutritive value. So adjustments should be made to the dietary composition as needs to be able to increase the accuracy of the formulated feed and maintain the PMR consistency, which can reduce the cost of the diet. So besides that, controlling the forage and the dietary particle size could further improve the dry matter intake and the rumen health in dairy cows. I think we all know that's very important if we want to have high quality milk and healthy cow, very important. So the key here is how to maintain the rumen health and the feed efficiency. But always, if the disorders happen, the medicine, including some lungs extracts, should be used to treat the disease in dairy cattle. For this part, I think there is no specific SOP in China compared to other countries, Europe, USA. We use the similar procedures in the world. So, but at the same time, some of the plant extracts can be used to dairy cows. I think also now and in future. So Carla.
Very nice. So I had the perception from your talk that milk quality is a big problem in China. And do you have anything different to treat mastitis, for example? Or do you use antibiotics, conventional antibiotics?
Okay. The question, I don't think we have the big problem in the quality of the raw milk. And I think changed a lot since 2008. Now the raw milk quality is similar to the European countries, especially the fat, the protein, the SCC, and the TBC is already the best during these 10 years. So, but we have no idea when the cow is sick. So absolutely, if she has the mastitis, we use the antibiotics. But some the traditional Chinese herb can be also used to treat the animals, such as I know is for example, the emodin is extracted from the rhubarb, can use the practice to treat the bovine mastitis. And also the one is the mori, is extracted from the mulberry tree, also has the anti-inflammatory function, and now is in practice to control the bovine mastitis. We really have some, for example, others, the huanglian, dahuang, and the huangqi are commonly used as the antibiotics and in the animals. So we have some.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you have anything for treating diarrhea of calves?
Yeah.
Because they are receiving this milk with antibiotics, it may change the microbiome of the intestines, and we have an imbalance.
Yeah. So my team did this kind of research, some a lot, especially we analyze the diarrhea for the young animals is between 2 to 3 weeks is the highest risk for them. So if the diarrhea happened, absolutely we need to use some antibiotics, or we have more suggestions or the choice. For example, one the Chinese traditional medicine is called huanglian, can be used to treat the indigestion, and also we already see the good results. Also, another one we call the huoxiang zhengqi. This is also from a Chinese plant and widely used in China, the dairy farm. The above two medicines are given in the form of pellet by mixing with some feed, and I think it can support till therapy is also given in the form of infusion, but it depends on the condition of the animal. So in China, always you can see this kind of plant extracts be added to the feed. It can be prevention or can use for the animals sometimes.
Okay, it's more a prophylactic than a treatment approach, right?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Very nice. Okay, thank you. Let's turn now to aquaculture with Dr. Bruno. Hello, Dr. Bruno.
Hello, Dr. Carla. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, I apologize for the delay. I was having connectivity issues here, but I think that now everything has been solved.
Okay, thank you. So considering that the aquaculture industry is the one with the higher growth rate for many years, how additives are being considered as a way to improve performance and health by the industry and by the producers?
Fantastic. So yes, you're right. Aquaculture has been leading, growth in all the other protein industries compared to beef, cattle, pork, poultry. And I'd like to share a picture here just to illustrate that, that growth. This is showing over 30 years of aquaculture data, and as of 2020, we have surpassed, aquaculture has surpassed wild fish capture. So we're now farming more fish than capturing fish from natural stocks. And this is really great. It's a really great milestone for aquaculture. And this has been due to, as you said, this miracle growth in the last couple of decades due to heavy investment on research and technology development to improve feed, to improve genetics, to improve everything in terms of operations. But that intensification comes with a cost, right? And the main one, I brought here three main ones, three main dilemmas that are involved with this aquaculture intensification and growth miracle over the last couple of decades. And the first one, related to your question on the use of additives and natural and bio inputs, is the fish meal dilemma. And I'd like to illustrate here that problem. So what we're doing right now in aquaculture, and this has been a recurring topic in aquaculture research, that is grinding fish to grow fish again. Obviously, we're not grinding fish that are suitable for human consumption. I brought here the example of meat, mackerel. We don't eat that, but at the same time, some people think that grinding fish to grow fish is not nice. It's controversial. So at the same time, fish meal, grinding fish to grow fish again, has been declining in terms of availability over the years. In spite of a recent increase over the last 2 years, in the long term, the availability has gone down, prices have gone up. So we must find alternatives. And we're trying to look at now bio inputs that we can use to replace fish meal in animal feeds to feed fish. The other dilemma is therapeutics. So using, mostly I'm talking here in this dilemma now, is the use of antibiotics that has been already touched by Dr. Cal. But more specifically is about microbial resistance to antibiotics. And as you can see here, some tests showing some bacteria being resistant to the most used antibiotics in aquaculture. And also, as you mentioned, Dr. Carla, there's this public perception as well that seafood has to be more, has to be healthier, and they believe that antibiotics being fed to animals end up in their plate. So we must change that perception. We must educate the public, but at the same time, the industry has to do its due diligence to reduce the use of antibiotics and reduce the increase in microbial resistance as well. And last but not least, the environmental dilemma. So I brought here this nice picture of an algal bloom. So eutrophication of natural bodies have also been a major concern in the intensification of aquacultural operations. So how can we address that issue with additives in the feed and making feed more efficient, increasing performance, and also decreasing the outputs coming out of these aquaculture operations so that we can avoid such problems like the formation of dead zones in the ocean and whatnot. But what is really like the role of these bio inputs? What are these guys going to do to help all these things, all these problems in aquaculture? And the first one, probably the most talked topic in terms of bioinputs in aquaculture has been the use of prebiotics. And this is like an alternative to the use of therapeutics. And as you said, working more like preventing a disease from happening than treating a disease, right, with antibiotics. So what are these guys? Well, the most important ones already being used by the industry are mananoligosaccharides and beta glucans. These are the two molecules that are most researched, and now we have commercial products that are already available to the industry, not only to the feed industry, but also to commercial growers that want to add that to their fish diets. We have here, just showing some of the benefits of these guys, of the prebiotics. Well, obviously they improve immune system, so immune responses. But the most important one, maybe this that we can see in the middle, the effect of inactivating the bad guys, the bad bacteria that live in the gut, and washing them away from the intestinal tract from the animal. So they inactivate bad bacteria, as well as other benefits, such as serving as food for the probiotics, the good guys. So this is another additive that we've been using heavily in aquaculture. The industry is really looking into this. This is a reality. It's not the future anymore. We are seeing more and more of this in feed formulations. So the industry is really seeing the benefits of adding probiotics and improving the immune and health status of these fish, so that we don't need to feed them antibiotics in the future if they get sick, because they don't get sick. And the most used one is here Bacillus subtilis. I brought a picture of a colony of Bacillus subtilis, and what these guys do, well, first they inhibit the growth of bad guys, the pathogenic bacteria in the gut, as well as enhance nutrient absorption in the gut. So I brought here a picture of, on the top one, fish being fed a conventional diet with no probiotics, and the one in the bottom with fish feeding on a diet enriched with probiotics. And that is a picture of, it's a electron microscopy picture of intestinal gut, and that's the intestinal cell, enterocyte, and the brush border of the cell, showing that the brush border is higher, it's taller than in fish not receiving the probiotics. So probiotic is increasing the nutrient absorption capacity of these intestinal cells, and the animal responds with better growth. They grow faster. And this is another great opportunity to improve feed efficiency overall in the system, right? Third one to address that is enzymes. And the most important one here I brought is phytase. So in this case, phytase is added to fish diets, especially to diets that are rich in plant-based ingredients like corn, like soy, and organic phosphorus that is rich in these ingredients is not available to fish. So we add phytase and we improve phosphorus availability for the fish. So not only we improve the nutritional status for the animal, but also we reduce the phosphorus being put in the environment, because we reduce phosphorus excretion. Another one here is, well, we don't really necessarily have to add these probiotics, these beneficial bacteria to the diet itself. We can add that to the water. And there's been a ton of research on this topic. And I brought here the concept of bioflocs, and I'll put just into perspective a little bit, showing, what a biofloc really is. Is a complex organism here that is made of algae, heterotrophic bacteria, organic matter, all these guys are living in symbiosis. And what they do, they help in treat and convert organic matter in a fish tank. This is especially being done for shrimp aquaculture, but fish as well. And what they do, they convert all the carbon into protein, and then some fish can even utilize that. So it's a double use of the probiotic, not only to treat the water, but also serving as a protein source. And last here, I brought food scraps, but not really, right? I don't think we can feed fish with food scraps. They're not going to like it. They're not going to grow. Imagine feed salmon with this. But, well, first, we can feed that to insects. So these guys here are really, really hungry. So there's this new concept now. Well, this is not really, really new, but in terms of aquaculture, it's quite new. So these are black soldier fly larvae that are really hungry and can convert organic waste into insect protein. So this has been a hot topic now. Europe is doing this really well. Some companies are even doing this commercially. So again, this has a double service, not only to provide an alternative ingredient, an alternative protein to feed animals, but also treat waste, right? Instead of dumping all those food scraps, all that organic waste into landfills, filling up the landfills, maybe polluting the environment, we're now creating protein, and this is really high in protein. So once the larvae are harvested, it can be ground up and converted into insect meal, which is really high in protein, 40% of dry matter protein and also 30% in fat. And it's really good fat, really nice fatty acid profile, and also amino acid profile. And as a matter of fact, I brought here this study that has been, it's really fresh from the oven, published by one of our doctorate students at the Animal Science Department, Angelica. So she studied the inclusion of insect meal for Nile tilapia, and not only the fish did great, so they did not show any differences in growth compared to the controls feeding a conventional diet, but also they saw that their immune status, their health improved, and they survived a challenge. Well, some people might say, well, tilapia, these guys can't eat anything, it's not fair. Well, how about salmon? Really recent research, 2019, feeding black soldier fly to replace fish meal in salmon. Again, they were able to replace 100% of the fish meal with insect meal and did not see problems in performance. So the fish did just fine. And the last, kind of related to this novel protein and alternative proteins of insects, is single cell protein, which is not really a novel concept per se, but large scale production has been struggling over the years. But the first example here brought is algae, and I brought a picture of photobioreactors. So we're growing algae in this control environment. The great thing about algae and single-cell protein is that we can have a crop in 24 hours. So we can harvest these crops in 24 hours compared to conventional crops like corn, soybean that we have to wait 3-4 months to harvest. So every 24 hours, the more you harvest, the more you have. You harvest them, next 24 hours, you double that biomass. And algae has been a great example in aquaculture. Algae can produce protein, fatty acids, even in pharmaceuticals. So it has been explored by the pharmaceutical industry as well. But at the same time, we have bacteria and yeasts. These can be heterotrophs or also chemoautotrophs. So the algae photoautotroph, right? So the photosynthesize, and these guys here, they can fix carbon using a chemical process. And this has given rise to this new concept called gas to protein concept, where we can now tackle several problems at once. We can use green energy off-grid to break down the water molecule through the electrolysis process to produce hydrogen, and then we feed that hydrogen to bioreactors containing autotrophs that are converting hydrogen into water and fixing carbon. So we are also tackling here the carbon dioxide problem and global warming, and we're growing really nutrient-dense organism with over 60-70% of protein, and that can ultimately feed animals that can feed humans. Some people might say that this is a thing of the future. It's really not cost effective. We're years from getting there, but there are companies already doing something similar, and we have this company in Norway that are launching this product into the market, feed kind to aquaculture, pigs, and also the pet industry. So again, we're still in its infancy in terms of converting these resources that are not of biological value to humans into a really nice and nutrient-dense product that can be fed to animals and ultimately feed us, the people. And that goes along with this new idea of converting a linear economy into a circular economy. So far, what we're doing, just mining more and more resources, and that is a one-way trip. So we mine phosphorus, we feed to crops, and we harvest those crops, and that phosphorus goes away, maybe pollutes the environment, and it causes algal blooms and so on. And the trend has been going into a more circular economy where we keep the nutrients within this closed loop. So not only energy, but also nutrients. And that has been great example has been the food production, agriculture. We can really apply circular economy to food production, to agriculture. It's a prime example where we can recycle nutrients within the system and have more local production of food. We grow food where people really need it. So with that, we can divert our really good and healthy soils to grow food to feed humans, to feed people with the crops that we really eat. And then we divert the not so good areas, the not so good soil, to grow these alternative proteins to produce in areas where conventional crops wouldn't grow otherwise. And we use that protein to grow a lot of good and lean protein. So I brought this picture here. Maybe some of you are hungry. It's lunchtime. So I want to keep it for 3 seconds to keep you really hungry. So the ultimate goal is to grow really good protein and my final message is that you all should eat more fish because fish is good for you. And that was it, Dr. Carla. And we'll be for discussions.
Okay, wow. You have so many choices to use in aquaculture. It's amazing how many studies do you have with this. And if you would pick one of these solutions that you present today, what would that be?
Initially,
which one?
Yeah,
just one, and
I would
very
go
shortly
with probiotics. Okay? It is like the most developed technology right now. We have products that are already certified for aquaculture. We have industry in Brazil doing this for real. This is happening right now, and we've seen the results. You know, I've done research at our lab. Remember? Yeah.
Are
Yes,
the results
we've seen
consistent?
results, and even with our native species in Brazil that are consistent with the international literature.
Mhm.
And I would bet on probiotics for now, for dietary probiotics. The insects and the single cell
Okay.
protein is maybe something for the future. Yeah.
For the future. And you don't have anything
We
with
do.
plant
We have
extracts?
some plant extracts. I didn't bring them here. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the results are always, they're following the same trend of prebiotics and probiotics being used to replace antibiotics and enhance growth, promote good bacteria in the gut, and avoid growth of other bad pathogenic bacteria, and ultimately enhancing the immune system. So we've worked with some essential oils, but again, in comparing that to probiotics, I would say that probiotics is more developed in terms of industry use.
Very nice. A lot of options. So I think we have some questions from the audience. So Fabiano, please put everybody in. So considering the talk of Bruno, Dr. Zin and Dr. Cal, do you want to add something? Dr. Zin? I can hear you. Yeah, now.
Now you can. Really unlike dairy and even aquaculture, or the feedlot industry has a very big handle on the inputs. In other words, we monitor very closely cost of gain, and so we can show the differences that occur, very small differences, and so this has been a challenge for a lot of companies that try to introduce new products, is because the variation is such that the response has not been consistent, and there's just a lot of data to show that. So I started to speak Spanish, especially with the prebiotics and the probiotics. The response has not been consistent in feedlot cattle, but there has been a generally favorable response. And like I said, how many feedlots are using it, I don't really have that, but I would say probably 20 to 40% of the cattle on feed are receiving something like that. And my own opinion is that probably a big part of that is just because the risk in terms of putting it in the diet is small. And so they look at it as kind of an insurance, like giving a vaccine or something else. You know, there may be a benefit, there may not be a benefit, but
and the cost is not so high, right?
The cost there are some of those out there. The cost is very, very low, and the input, the mechanization, the technology for getting it in the diet is just really advanced. So these are very positive aspects for those two. And I think the future, I would agree with Bruno that the future in that area is very positive, very, very positive.
And we don't have anything with essential oils for beef cattle.
We have. There's a lot. I've done a lot of research. Other people, you know, I'm sure the problem is just not much. You know, we need a lot more studies, and in fact, in vivo, you know, the work with essential oils is just very small. And looking at in vivo aspects of site and extended digestion, these types of very, very limited information on that, just in vitro stuff, as far as its antimicrobial activity and so forth. And so it's in its infant stage. And like I said, the cost is just so high. I'm a little bit, I think it's going to be a while before that stuff is, we see it being used. But I think a lot of push by the industry to the allied industry, the people that are working to market these, they're working to see how to get this price down so that it could be more attractive to the feedlot.
Right. Dr. Calves, something to add?
Yes, and I think before we talk about the additives, we must pay more attention to the feedstuff, such as the corn, the soybean meal, and the cotton seed meal, and the forage quality we already discussed. So the better feedstuff and the balanced ration, the less additive in diet, and the lower cost per kilo milk or beef. So for sure, the additives are the key components in the ration, and I all agree with Dr. Jin's suggestions and recommendations. But at the same time, we all know that the feed additives can be an effective and economic additions to the balanced rations. But we need the research, more research results, especially we call the science-proved products have the more sustainability, very important. So we will see the more research results for the new products in the future. So such as we talk about the probiotics and this kind of products we use in dairy, but some we found is used for the calves on the liquid diet, or we use for the transition cows, and during stress conditions we do not see much in the milking cows. I think a very important thing here is the inputs and the outputs. Based on my understanding, at least the one input, at least the 3 outputs, so we can use it. So I'm not sure whether in the future this kind of product can, decrease the cost we can use in dairy and beef or other animals, and a lot of the options there. But first, I think the balanced ration very important. Carla.
Yeah, and I think that one important thing is to understand the challenge that the animal is suffering. So I think that I may be wrong, but I think that beef cattle are not in so much challenge from the environment as dairy, especially dairy calves, or even fish. So maybe there is a window of opportunity to work with this kind of bio inputs that are greater for some kind of species or categories inside of a determined species. So maybe that is something like this. I'm not sure. So we have a question from Professor Fernando Andreotti from Esalq. And he says, we do see a growing market for human probiotics based on the use of several microbial species. Do we have the same trend for animal production? And I think we have touched that during our talk today. And yes, it's growing. It's growing. We have a lot of commercial products. Some are called frou-frou powders. It's something that we don't know if it works or not. We don't have consistent results. So it's sometimes like a lottery. You put in the diet and maybe eventually you see a result, something like this. What do you think?
I think that it's important that you touched upon a really, touching really the wound in there of the results that sometimes they don't agree. Even if you test the same species, like if I test the same product that someone in Norway did here in Brazil, the same fish species, I'm not going to be able to replicate that study. Well, first of all, if we're doing experiments with commercial products, we never know what's in there. So first, I think it's really important when studying probiotics is that we go for like a pure culture that we can do within our lab, or maybe an indigenous probiotic within that area, like in the region in Brazil or in São Paulo, for example. And we grow that, we purify it, and we use that strain in our experiments. So we know what we're growing in there, what we're feeding our fish. So that's number one. Is sometimes the companies don't release what they have there, so it's proprietary. You never know if the microbe is there, if it's live or not. And second, I truly believe that it has to do a lot with the challenges that the animal have. Like if a study was not conducted within the same challenges, if an animal was not challenged enough, maybe the probiotic will not show differences, because the animal itself was in a perfect condition within this bubble that it wouldn't be otherwise challenged by a microbe, like a pathogen, and then that wouldn't affect growth negatively. So we really need to go for more realistic, like real life situations, really simulating farming conditions that the animals are challenged, simulating real conditions, so that we can test these products under these challenging conditions. Because if we give the perfect conditions for the animal in the lab setup, they're not going to express any difference from the controls. So that's my opinion.
It's not unusual that where we see advantages is when the controls do very poorly, and the additive group just does what you would expect. So what Bruno's saying is actually valid, but that's why we add additives. Not that every time we expect a response, but we're adding it as an assurance against some type of response. Yeah. But again, let me just reiterate, the problem is we don't know how these things really work. We talk about how they affect, immunostimulation or modulation or antimicrobial aspect. We really don't know exactly how these products work. And that, with the probiotic and the prebiotic industry, I've seen so much change in how they decide how they market, how their products actually work, from the beginning till where we see it right now. And some of these products are just wonderful concepts in search of evidence. And I think that but there is a great future in it, and we need to recognize the potential. But again, because what Bruno is saying, the problem is that until we really understand how these different products really affect the performance, we can't use them strategically, and so it's hard to say, what would be the challenge that would bring about the effect. For example, we talk about heat stress and how these products seem to work better under conditions of heat stress. But why? What would be the reason for that? You see what I'm saying? Well, then they say because of intestinal leakage or some other thing, and they just try to explain. But the point is that as researchers, we need to focus in on the type of challenge and look at it under those conditions as best we can. One of the questions that Flavio asked, and I think it's a very good question, is about the university research as opposed to something else, all right? One of the problems we have with university studies is that obviously many times the conditions of the animal they're more supervised. In other words, animal health is almost not an issue because the animals are being necessarily observed individually daily. But actually a big problem that people might not be aware of with respect to university studies especially nowadays, because we don't have many scientists that I would call working scientists. Most of the research is actually being done by students. And these students have no experience in what they're doing, or very, very little experience in what they're doing. And so the quality of supervision and so forth in the work is sometimes questionable. And oftentimes the research would have needed to be repeated, but instead of being repeated, they just simply published what they had. And so we just have to remember that a lot of the university work is being done by students who don't have much experience, and therefore, you know, work could be better.
That's a nice point. Very nice.
Yeah.
What else? Go ahead, Dr. Calves. I can't hear you.
You have to
Yes, mute.
Yeah.
So agree with them, and especially more research. I think in the university level we have the research farm, and also we have some we call it the field farm to finish the trial to evaluate the product. Also, I think we all want to see more the results from the universities and the research institutes, such as a lot of additives used in the corn silage, the silage bacteria in inoculants, and also the yeast culture, this kind of things. More research and more results. Then finally, we have the whole world have a meta-analysis to evaluate what's the final results, why this kind of things. So my collaborations similar to our A5 Alliance, this kind of things. I want to add, yes.
Very nice. Well, I think we are done. We are on time. If you don't have anything more to add, I want to thank you very much for your participation and collaboration. It was a pleasure to talk to you, to talk to Dr. Zin that I met like 22 years ago, and amazingly, he looks the same. And Dr. Bruno, that is my colleague, and it was a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Calves. We both work in the same research area, and I think we can follow up with this discussion after that. Okay, so on behalf of the A5 Alliance, we thank you all for joining us in this morning or evening in China in this webinar. And before we finish, let me remind you that we have another webinar tomorrow about biocontrol of pests and diseases at 11:30 Brazilian time. Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
All right. See ya.